What's up?
So, Obsession might actually be the most disturbing horror movie of 2026 so far. And honestly, not because it has the scariest monster, not because of cheap jump scares, but because this movie feels way too real sometimes. After watching it, I genuinely understood why so many people online are calling this one of the most uncomfortable horror experiences of the year. Because underneath all the blood, supernatural chaos, and creepy imagery, this movie is really about obsession, control, loneliness, and toxic desire. And that psychological angle makes everything hit way harder. The story itself sounds deceptively simple at first. We follow Bear, played by Michael Johnston, a socially awkward guy who secretly has feelings for his friend Nikki, but instead of confessing normally, he ends up using this cursed supernatural object called the One-Wish Willow to make Nikki fall completely in love with him. And obviously, that decision destroys everything. What starts as awkward romance slowly mutates into pure psychological nightmare fuel. And honestly, that slow transformation is exactly why the movie works so well. Because Obsession understands something many modern horror movies forget. Real fear comes from discomfort building over time, not random loud noises every 10 minutes. The movie constantly makes you feel uneasy, even during scenes where technically nothing scary is happening. The atmosphere itself feels wrong, like reality is slowly rotting around these characters. And the scariest part, you understand why everything is happening. That's what makes it disturbing psychologically. Now, I gotta talk about Inde Neverete because honestly, she absolutely carries this movie. Her performance as Nikki is terrifying in a way that's hard to explain without spoilers. At first, she feels sweet, charming, normal, but once the wish starts corrupting reality, she slowly becomes this deeply unsettling presence. Not in a loud, demonic possession way, more like someone whose behavior becomes increasingly unpredictable and wrong. There are scenes where she smiles while doing horrifying things that genuinely made the theater uncomfortable. And honestly, that unpredictability makes her scarier than most horror villains this year, because you never know what emotional state she's going to enter next. 1 second vulnerable, the next second completely unhinged. A lot of people are already comparing her breakout energy to early Anya Taylor-Joy performances, and honestly, I kind of see it. She has that same unsettling screen presence where your eyes are glued to her even when you feel uncomfortable. Now, one thing I really appreciated about this movie is how it mixes psychological horror with dark comedy, because there are moments where audiences genuinely laugh and then immediately regret laughing seconds later. The tonal shifts are brutal. A funny interaction suddenly turns violent. An awkward romantic moment suddenly becomes horrifying. That constant instability keeps you emotionally exhausted the entire movie. And honestly, I think that's intentional. The movie wants you trapped inside Bear's collapsing mental state. Now, visually, director Curry Barker absolutely nailed the atmosphere, especially for a debut horror feature. The lighting feels oppressive. Shadows constantly swallow parts of the frame. Ordinary domestic spaces slowly start feeling cursed. And the sound design? Bro, the sound design alone deserves credit. Tiny background noises become anxiety-inducing. Silence becomes threatening. Even normal household sounds start feeling sinister after a while. And thankfully, the movie relies more on practical effects and atmosphere instead of drowning everything in CGI nonsense, which honestly makes the gore way more effective. And yes, this movie gets very brutal, especially in the final act. Without spoiling specifics, there are scenes involving mutilation, self-harm, and body horror that genuinely made audiences react loudly in my theater. Some people loved that intensity, others thought it crossed the line. And honestly, I understand both reactions. Because Obsession is not trying to be an easy, crowd-pleasing horror movie. It wants you to disturb you emotionally. Now, thematically, this is where the movie becomes way more interesting than a normal supernatural horror film, because underneath everything, this story feels like a critique of nice guy syndrome and toxic obsession culture. Bear doesn't see Nikki as a real person anymore. He sees her as something he deserves emotionally, and that entitlement slowly destroys reality itself. That's why the horror works.
The supernatural elements are basically amplifying emotional manipulation and coercive control into literal nightmare logic. And honestly, that makes the movie feel uncomfortably modern, especially in the era of dating apps, parasocial obsession, and emotional dependency. A lot of horror movies talk about trauma. This movie feels like it actively traps you inside unhealthy attachment. That's why some viewers found it genuinely upsetting, especially women online who said parts of the film felt too real. And honestly, that reaction says a lot about how effective the movie actually is.
Now, obviously, not everyone's gonna love this film. Some people will absolutely hate how disturbing and emotionally ugly it gets. Others will think the gore is excessive. And if you're expecting a fun popcorn horror movie with simple scares, this probably isn't for you. But if you love horror movies like Hereditary, Midsommar, or The Substance that focus on psychological collapse and emotional discomfort, then yeah, this movie absolutely deserves your attention. Personally, I think Curry Barker just announced himself as a major new horror director to watch, and I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if Obsession becomes a future cult horror classic, not because it's fun, but because it leaves people disturbed long after the credits end. Anyway, what do you guys think? Have you already watched Obsession? And do you think it actually deserves the title of scariest horror movie of 2026? Or is the internet overhyping it? Let me know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this review, and please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next one.